welcome to the first season of the Is the Planet Doomed podcast. This is a project produced by the students of a course with the same name in the Department of Geography at Colgate University. By unpacking some of the world's most pressing and complex problems, the episodes in this podcast help answer the question, well, are we doomed? In this episode, Aknewlon discusses one of the largest environmental disasters you've probably never heard of.
Do you remember the Deepwater Horizon oil spill? On April 20th, 2010, the British petroleum oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico began to leak. It oozed for 87 days, unleashing 4.9 million barrels of oil into the Gulf. It is the largest maritime oil spill in history. I was in 6th grade at the time, so my priorities were simple. Friends, soccer practice, boys. I spent a lot of time back then thinking about boys. My only concept of environmental protection were the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. Still, the images of the oil spill struck a nerve in me, and have stuck with me to this day. Do you remember? The media was flooded with images of wildlife and wetlands caked in oil. I can still vividly picture one specific Dawn soap commercial. Rescuers were saving baby ducks from a beach and using Dawn soap to remove the oil from their feathers. As an 11-year-old animal lover, these images were extremely powerful. Now, not all disasters are this photogenic. The BP oil spill flooded the media with imagery, creating a large public reaction. But many other spills fly under the radar, of the media and of the public. Now, let me fast forward to today. Have you ever heard of the Sanchi oil spill? If you answered yes, I'm impressed. Can you tell me when it happened? What about where? I'm not asking you this to make you feel bad, but I do assume that a majority of you said no. And that's not your fault. To be completely honest, before I began my research for this episode, I would have said no too. And that's what I want to talk about today. On January 6th, an Iranian oil tanker collided with a cargo ship in the East China Sea. This got almost no media coverage, especially outside of Asia. So I'll fill you in on the details. The tanker was called the Sanchi. It carried 32 crewmen and 960,000 barrels of oil. Nearby fishermen witnessed the crash and attempted to rescue the crew.
It took us about a half an hour to get there. It was a big fire, dangerous. Explosions were still happening.
That was Ling Pei, one of the fishermen who aided in the rescue. They were able to save all 21 men aboard the cargo ship, the CF Crystal. But the fire he saw aboard the Sanchi burned for over a week before finally sinking. 3 bodies were recovered, but there is no longer any hope of finding any of the 32 crew members alive. The casualties of this spill are not limited to the crew. While some of the oil aboard the tanker burned off, much of it has entered the East China Sea. An oil slick has formed, with an area of over 40 square miles. For reference, that's the size of Paris. And the oil, known as condensate, is a lighter crude variety. So, unlike the oil from the BP spill, it does not clump up, and this makes it much harder to remove from the water. Dave Santillo, a marine biologist and senior scientist at Greenpeace, worries about the potential environmental effects of the spill.
What is clear is that the oil on board will have impacts on marine life. Some of the components of that oil will be particularly toxic, and they would have dissolved relatively quickly into the water.
You might think that's great. The oil is going to dissipate. But Santillo warned me that this is not the case.
And that can be more harmful to some species than the physical presence of the oil itself. This is an area which is rich in marine life. It's an area that is incredibly important for commercial fisheries, for fish and for squid. And it's also important as a corridor for wildlife, including whales and porpoises.
If the effects on marine life don't scare you, then consider the effects on local economies. China accounts for 17.4% of global catch, and exports $19.6 billion of fish each year. And we've seen what an oil spill can do to fisheries. Following the Deepwater Horizon spill, hundreds of local businesses were shut down. Among them was William Granger. He had lived his whole life before the spill as a commercial shrimp fisherman, just 50 miles from the rig. There were no shrimp in the aftermath of the spill, and Granger lost everything.
Lost my house. I lost 40 acres of land. I had to sell my boats. I lost all my credit. I lost everything I had. Future don't look good, you know. And it's sad.
He's not alone. An initial estimate said that the spill would cost the fishing industry $2.5 billion. Sadly, many estimates from this time were ridiculously low. It is likely that cost greatly exceeded this number. In China, a similar effect is expected. Over 14 million people from China's coast work in the fishing industry. This does not include merchants and shipping, so that means the number is even higher. Now, China did not shut down fishing after the spill, but scientists worry that fish caught in this time could be highly contaminated, even toxic. As the risks of illness go up, so do other risks in the industry. Fisheries dominate China's coastal economy, and China's economy is important on a global scale. So, theoretically, there should be some kind of reaction on the global scale. But, as we realized earlier, there isn't. So what gives? Why am I still thinking about, and hearing about, the Deepwater Horizon spill, when I haven't seen a single article or post about the Sanchi collision? I'll ask another question, although both ask the same thing. If a tree falls in the forest, and no one is around to hear it, did it really happen? I know. This riddle is silly, but think about it. Do we need to experience the effects of something for it to happen? What about to matter? The BP oil spill really didn't matter to 11-year-old me until I saw baby ducks. Following the media's coverage of the spill, volunteer rates for cleanup rose exponentially. Donation rates rose. Documentaries were made. People reacted. In the spring and summer of 2010, you couldn't go more than a day without hearing someone talking about it.
All right, we start with the Fox News alert.
With breaking news this hour.
And now we turn to that oil rig that sank after it exploded in the Gulf of Mexico.
But they had the baby ducks. The Gulf had big globs of oil balled on the surface. And journalists could show this on the nightly news. They could talk about the snot-like consistency of the midnight black wads, throwing in every nauseating descriptive word they could think of. Condensate, the oil spilled off of China, doesn't form these globs. It's clear. It dissolves into the water and spreads out into a thin layer on the surface. Even if it's just as deadly, a washed-up fish does not catch the eye. At least not as much as a cute animal coated in black oil. Besides the initial collision and fire, there is nothing from China to show to get people to care. And sadly, in today's climate, an explosion halfway across the world is hardly news. But let me make it clear, this spill does matter. It matters for the marine ecosystems in the East China Sea. It matters for the Chinese economy. It matters. The lack of media coverage is not because it isn't important. It's because there's no baby animals. There's no baby ducks. There's no spectacle. But if you want to, you can cause one. You could share this podcast, or if you don't like me, and that's fine, you could share an article about the spill, or talk about it with friends over dinner, with your family the next time you call home. In today's social media society, virtually the whole world is connected. You have the power to spread information much further than you know. It's up to you to use it. For Colgate University, I'm Alexandra Aknewlon.